So welcome to our CPD session. This week we are focusing on feedback as actions. So the very first thing that we need to do is to recap our Mayflower pedagogy. So remember, what we call our Mayflower pedagogy is total teaching. And we always start from the outside in. So this diagram, if you were to take it to pieces, the 0 to 10 would be our PLB. The red square are our 4 C's. The blue circle is our AFL loop, the 5 R's. And the yellow triangle is our triad teaching, our teach, reteach, react, respond roles. So if anybody ever questioned us, that is our Mayflower pedagogy, our total teaching. And throughout our whole CPD, we need to be having this in our minds about how it fits in with our Mayflower pedagogy. So any questioning that we've done, how does that fit in? And now we've moved on to feedback. How does what we're learning about feedback fit into our Mayflower pedagogy? So very quickly, last week we started learning and thinking about feedback in action, and we listened to David William and we worked through our walkthrough books. So just to quickly recap, we looked how we can focus forwards with feedback, how we must keep it positive and specific, how we have to match the feedback message to the student. So whether we're nurturing or whether we need to push that student a little bit more, how we're avoiding the sat-nav syndrome, and how we're reducing feedback over time. So we're going to kick off today's session by handing over to Penny. So Penny, over to you.
Okay, everyone. So we have our book of walkthroughs, which give us a really good use of images and instruction and exactly what you can say and do with your pupils. So I'd just like to put the question out there asking, who knows of a walkthrough that they have in their classroom? Can anybody give me an example of a walkthrough that all of you have in your classroom?
Good question.
Hands up, or will I cold call?
No.
We were saying about the PLB.
Ah, 10 out of 10.
Yay.
Oh, woohoo. Yes, it is.
I was ready.
It is your PLB. Your PLB gives you a walkthrough of what to say, what to do in your classroom. And what I wanted to go through was just very briefly to see if everybody is using it to its full potential. So this is what we have as our PLB that that everybody has got in their room. But I've just added some arrows and some information at the top, because sometimes I think we've got so used to saying to some of our children, show me 10 out of 10 behaviour, or I think you're at a 5 or you're at a 1. And actually, if we haven't gone through the steps and we haven't reminded the children of those steps and what's actually on this walkthrough, then they can't always orientate themselves or understand what it is that why they're actually at the position that they're at on our PLB chart, and what they have to do to go back up the chart and not down. So what we've done is I've looked and I've said that the first bit where we've got our looks like is actually describing the action. So if a child in your class is doing something, whether they're at a 0 or at a 10, it's really good to describe the action to them. So yes, we've got our pictures that we can use, that we can focus in on, but use simple language to describe what it is that they are doing and what it is that you are either pleased with or not so pleased with. The next one is to name their behavior. So obviously what they're doing is because of this behavior or leads to this behavior. So again, talk it through with them. And this is important whether, like I said, they're at a 0 or a 10, because sometimes they will need reminding of what it is that they need to do to be at a 10. They're not always going to fully understand this or be able to name those actions, or do they know exactly what absorbed means? Do they know what engaged means? Have we gone back over those with them? Link it to the measure so that they're starting to understand what that behavior is and how it links in. And then explain the feeling. One of the big things with our children that they don't understand is their behavior obviously is expressed through their actions, but they don't know what that feeling is. And until they understand what each of their feelings are and what they mean, we can't really start to turn their behavior around. That's the biggest bit that our children have trouble with. And then obviously we need to dictate the consequence. And we often dictate the consequence when they are doing something wrong, but I don't know whether we always dictate the consequence when they're doing something right. I don't know whether we always concentrate or think to say, because you did this, this and this and did that really well, this is what happened. So I know everybody does use it, and I know our children are really good at being able to name numbers, but I think sometimes we forget, or it may be because we don't have time or lots of things are happening, to actually use PLB to its full potential, and to be able to use the language that is there. That is simple language, and it should be short and simple. So use what's on the board and see if the children fully understand what it is that you're saying to them. And that's it. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Penny. Does anybody have any questions for Penny about feedback and PLB before we move on? No? Okay, great. So today, sorry, I thought somebody said something then, but they didn't. So today, you'll notice that this feedback is a little bit different. We're looking at it from a different angle today. It's not just solely focusing on terms and marking and looking at children's books. We're trying to go a little bit deeper into feedback this week and to examine a whole range of different feedback ways that we come across in our class that we might not automatically think of as, oh, that's feedback. So I'll explain now the rest of this presentation. Some of you will be very aware and have a really good understanding of what we're about to share. Others, it's fairly new because some of this we learnt as an academy a couple of years ago. And obviously, if you've joined since, you won't have had chance really to have a look through all this in depth. So this is an overview of it now. And what will happen in the summer term, because our CPD, remember, is a spiral, we'll pick this up again in the summer term and we'll go on and examine and investigate a little bit further then. So we're going to focus on the walkthroughs as our backbone for this. And the section in your walkthrough books that you have is called Feedback as Actions. So again, split into the 5 steps. Remember, each section of the walkthroughs has 5 main segments. So this one has focusing on redrafting or redoing, rehearsing or repeating, revisiting and responding to more questions, which is great because that obviously fits in with our questioning module that we've just finished, relearning material and retesting, and research and recording. And if feedback is to move students forward in their learning, it can be helpful to frame it as an instruction to do something. It can be more useful and easier to understand than focusing on describing work that one has been done previously. And in giving feedback as actions, the feedback is embedded in the selection of the task. So the very first thing that we're going to look at is redrafting or redo. So very quickly, could anybody give me some examples of what we do on how we redraft and redo things at Mayflower? What do we do?
Purple polishing pen in writing.
Yeah, purple polishing pen. Thanks, Ross.
No problem.
Anyone from blue?
And
Dan?
Sarah. Was just me.
Dan or John? So our concept at Mayflower, what we do is edit to embed it, don't we? We do multiple drafts, and that's the angle that we're thinking at now for our feedback as actions. So this part, we're focusing on how we do our multiple drafting. So Ross was right, part of our multiple drafting is using our purple pen, but it's a much bigger picture than just purple pen. So we are just going to move on to the next slide, which is Austin's butterfly. So I remember when I first came here at the top of the steps, there was a beautiful display, and I remember Dave talking me through it about how a child had done it, and it was based on the process of Austin's butterfly, and that was what we do at Mayflower. We multiple draft to get work that's beautiful and good enough to share. So what we're going to do now, we're just going to watch a video. It's about 6 minutes long, and it explains the process of the Austin's butterfly, but it's done by explaining to groups of children throughout different ages. So I will just stop sharing this screen, and hopefully it will let me share the next screen. Oh, here it is. So before I start, Ellie, can you see this now?
Yes.
Okay, fab, thank you. So fingers crossed this works.
What would you guys say to teachers if they're not getting high quality work? Could they learn something from this? And what would you say to them that they could do differently in their classrooms? This is a story called Austin's Butterfly. And it's a true story about a first grade boy, and his name is Austin, and he goes to school, or used to go to school, in a town called Boise, Idaho. And in his class in Boise, Idaho, they were studying butterflies, and he had to do a project. His job in first grade was to draw a butterfly, and this is the butterfly that he picked. Austin had to use this photograph as his model, and he had to draw an accurate scientific drawing of this butterfly. This is called a tiger swallowtail.
I knew it.
Can you tell, Toby, why it's called tiger?
Because it kind of has the stripes of the tiger right there.
Good. So here was Austin's job. He was supposed to do a scientific drawing of that butterfly. But remember, Austin was only in first grade. And you know what he did? He forgot to look like a scientist carefully. He got his paper and he just started to draw the image of a butterfly that he had in his head. And he wasn't looking like a scientist. And so this is what he drew.
Whoa.
It's not bad, and it is a butterfly. But does it look exactly like this?
No.
No, it doesn't yet. It doesn't look exactly like this yet. And so they didn't look at this and say, good, Austin, you're done. They said, Austin, good start. Now we can start giving you critique so you can do a second draft and make it better, and a third draft and make it better, and you can make it much, much closer to this. And he was ready to go. All of the first graders in his critique group sat on the floor like you guys are, and they decided to split their advice into two kinds. First, just the shape of the wings. And then when the shape was right, they'd give him advice about the pattern inside the wings. Alia, what would you say?
You can make it much pointier.
Good. These wings could be much pointier. Who else would add something? Atak, what would you say?
About the angle, because not to be mean about
Yes.
the angle, it's just not exact. So
Okay, so show me. Come on up here, Atak. Show me what you would ask him to do slightly differently.
like to make it a little longer,
Longer where? Draw where you would do it.
right there.
Okay, so pull this out longer.
Yeah.
That's very specific, Atak. Thank you. Jamila, what would you say?
It's like triangle.
Good. Jamila, I love that. So you're saying more like a triangle shape. And I agree. Well, you know what? Those first graders came up with most of those same ideas. And you know what Austin said? He said, okay, I'll go try. And he went back to his seat and he drew this.
Wow.
Does this look more like a triangle?
Yeah.
Yeah. Did he go out further, like Atak was suggesting?
Yeah.
Did he add some jaggedness here?
Yes.
Like Cindy, did he get rid of that bottom thing?
Yes.
So he did listen to his friends and he made it better. It's not perfect. Toby, what would you say?
I'd say don't put those little tail things so pointed in. I'd say put them more pointed down.
Good. Okay, and Ethan, what would you say?
I think you should make the wings like this, not like this.
Okay, he listened to his friends and they said, this is really a lot better, Austin. That second draft really is better.
Yeah, maybe you can make a third one.
Good, maybe he could make a third draft.
Yeah.
And so he did this draft.
That's his third draft.
That's his third draft, Hadley. That's just right. Elijah, what do you notice there?
Well, one wing's more pointed than the other, and that side is a little bit higher than the other.
Good. Coburn?
Right here, it doesn't have the inside thing still.
Oh, okay. He needs a little bit more of that notch. So, do you think maybe he should do a fourth draft?
Yeah.
Well, that's just what he said. He said, shoot, okay, I got round again. I'll go back and do a fourth draft.
Listen.
He listened. Does it look more even like Elijah was suggesting?
Yes.
Yeah. And does it look like it's coming out a little sharper, like Cindy was suggesting? And like Attack was saying, it's a little, the angle looks a little better. So now Austin was feeling really good. He said, am I ready to add some pattern? And they said, okay, why don't you try adding some of the pattern? And he did.
He's good at it. He is so good.
And then they said, Austin, you're ready for color.
Oh.
Let's look at his last draft. And what do you think? Did it come out really good?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually looks way.
What do you think about how much progress he made? And Tak, what would you say about his progress?
He made like a lot of progress. He persevered doing it. His friends were honest with him.
What was it about the kinds of advice that they gave that allowed him to get better each time? Hassan?
Well, they told him what was wrong about it.
Did they say it's just wrong, or were they more specific than that?
They were more specific, but they weren't mean about it.
Great. Hadley.
Made 6 drafts.
And so is that something that other kids should learn from? What will we learn? What should we learn from that?
We can make other drafts if it's not right.
Good. So if it's not right, you can keep doing more drafts to make it better.
You just don't use things in your head. You want to use a sharp eye.
Good. He used the eyes of a scientist. Great.
Okay, I'll just go back to the original screen. Would anybody like to feedback what they thought throughout that video? Would like somebody from Red. What were your main takeaways from it, please?
We were noticed that obviously throughout the process that his butterflies got much better. We did say at one point when he got to number 3, it almost got a bit worse. And we were saying maybe like bored of multiple drafting by that point.
Perhaps.
That gets to that stage. But then, yeah, you can see like when he persevered, he got better at the end. We did question whether it was his work or a teacher.
Yeah,
but you can see it got much better at the end. Yeah.
And we thought for their age as well, if he was like taking on board all that feedback, he did a really good job of listening to what those children were saying and then putting it into practice and improving it.
Yeah, I'm wondering if it makes a difference, if it's peer feedback, perhaps that's more effective than saying it, perhaps. I'm not sure, maybe something to look into. Yeah, thank you. What about Dan? You look like you were going to say something on it.
Yeah, we were just saying it shows how crucial it is to redraft. Obviously, you've got the 6 redrafts he did there?
Yeah.
We're also questioning whether he did draw this at the end, if I'm honest. It looks amazing.
It's very, very good, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Any feedback from Green, please?
Yeah, we sort of agree with what's been said, really. It shows the importance of the edit to embed it, definitely. And we're looking at a writing point of view, but sorry.
Yeah, so I was looking at it generally across the board, and I picked up, these were my key takeaways. I just put that that it was really important how they were saying, that the peers were saying, yeah, that's a really good start. Now, what can we do next? What are your critiques for your next steps? That the feedback was specific and it was focused on one point at a time, and that it was peer feedback, majority of it, and that they gave time for the critique and for the revision throughout. So just maybe some points to consider when we're doing our editing at the end of perhaps writing. It's not just writing, is it? It's in everything that we do, really, our multiple drafting. So just some points to think about when we're feeding back, and how we make sure that we're designating enough time for the children to do their very best work, like we say, good enough to share. Next part that we're moving on to is rehearsing or repeating. So students focus on certain aspects of learning that they've already encountered with a view to improve their confidence and fluency. So example would be repeating sets of problems, rehearsing explanations or performances, and this improvement can then be done through repetition, and rehearsal can be secured in a range of subjects. So that leads us on to the 6 effective methods of learning, and this is by the learning scientists. Now, I know that a few years ago we did quite a lot of work on this, but many people have joined since then and maybe don't know it so much. So it's good practice for us just to remind ourselves of it. So these are taken from the PowerPoints that the learning scientists have created for the children to look through. So obviously this is aimed at a child reading this. So the first one would be space practice. So remember, this is about rehearsing and repeating. So just throughout these slides, think about our space practice, how we give feedback when we've got our space practice areas up and running. How are we going to give feedback for the art, for the DT, for the writing, and everything that's going on out there? So this is what they're suggesting that pupils do. So review information from each class, but not immediately after each class. So it's giving them that time. After you've reviewed the information from the most recent class, make sure you go back and study important older information to keep it fresh. Hold on. So when you sit down to study, make sure you are using effective study strategies rather than just rereading your class notes. Remember how we do the testing, the spacing, making the sketch notes. That incorporates all of our graphic organizer learning that we've been doing. And all this is feedback throughout, because if the children are talking to each other with that peer feedback, we're talking to them, we're thinking carefully about the language, we're matching it, we're making it specific and positive, we're constantly feeding back. And space practice, hold on, we have to create small spaces, a few days, and do a little bit over time so that it all adds up. So that's why it's called space practice, because we're spacing out our practice as we're going along. So we just need to think about how we are going to make sure that our feedback is effective and is purposeful through every aspect of our school. So through the PLB, through multiple drafting, through our space practice. Now let's think about it when we're revisiting and responding to more questions. So this is great because this feeds back exactly into what we were doing a few weeks ago with our different types of questioning. So all the different question strategies that we learned, our cold calling, our think, pair, share, this is the real time that we can use that and grab it and make the most of the feedback. So revisiting and responding to more questions. Instead of going back to make corrections on previous questions, it can be more productive to reteach key elements where common errors were occurring and then set a fresh set of questions to respond to. This feedback is essentially do these questions. So if we're thinking about revisiting, responding, reteaching, what immediately comes into mind is our Mayflower pedagogy, our total teaching. So remember our AFL loop. So recognize, record, report, review, respond. And how we do that is through our triad teaching, isn't it? So that would be our 3 roles. So we're thinking about how we address the misconceptions in classrooms. So obviously we go around, we've got our working walls, we've got our learning walls, and we have the flip chart at the front, and we all have different ways of collating our misconceptions, our P's and our E's, and working on it. So in Blue Block, we're quite lucky because we have a board and it's split into the 6 areas of effective learning. For example, the space practice, the retrieval, the elaboration. And that's really great for us because we can recognise whole class misconceptions and then we can put them into the 6 areas of learning. So I was talking to Sarah about this last night because not each class has this board and not each block has this board. So we were saying that it can be incorporated onto your normal learning walls, your assessments, your misconceptions can still be caught as class and put into these 6 areas of learning about how you're going to feedback, what are you going to do, what area do they need to focus on. So it's really tying all that in together. So we're thinking all the time. It's not just a quick verbal feedback there and then, it's taking it to the next step. When we know when we've addressed the misconceptions, what are we going to do to feedback and continue making sure that it's making sense and the children are progressing. So we're constantly coming back to our Mayflower pedagogy, which is why it's so important that we all understand it. So the next part is feedback as actions, relearning material and retesting. So where students are required to learn a specific set of knowledge but have gaps in their recall, feedback can be to identify which details they found hard to recall and to engage in retrieval practice activities. If the knowledge and the retrieval technique are very specific, this works well as feedback. So here, retesting and relearning. So it's all about retrieval, which is one of the 6 effective methods again. So this, remember, is for students. So how would they do it? Put away their class materials and write or sketch everything that they know. Again, it's brilliant because this really brings in our graphic organisers and our different ways of graphic schemas. So be as thorough as possible. Then check your class materials for accuracy and important points that you missed. So that's really good because we can check again through having a plethora of examples or through our questioning, and also its opportunities, for example, think, pair, share. It's opportunities for this informal peer feedback. Take as many practice tests as you can get your hands on. If you don't have ready-made tests, try making your own and trading with a friend who has done the same. So remember how we schedule testing points, assessment points rather, throughout our learning. You can also make flashcards. Just make sure you're practice recalling the information on them and go beyond the definitions by thinking of links between ideas. So flashcards / again, our graphic organisers. So your graphic organiser that you have up in your classroom that the children are adding to, and also the ones that they have in their individual books, like for example, their history book, every time they're adding to it, tracing through. This is all retrieval. So retrieval practice works best when you go back to check your class materials for accuracy afterwards. So it's really great. A great peer feedback activity is for them to flick back through, have a look through, trace through their their graphic organisers, and then actually take the time to go back through their books and discuss their learning together. And researching and recording. So where the students' work would be improved by making reference to a wider range of ideas, texts, case studies, examples, or contain more details, feedback can that they should do some focused research and record their findings. So this, if you think about this, and it fits into the big trivium that we were talking about. So at the beginning where we recall the information, then we question and explore, and then we share the learning. So this would fit into the questioning and exploring. And it's really important that this is the time to feedback. We walk around the classroom, we have that conversation. Like Penny was saying, we focus on the language, we make sure that the vocab is understood, that it's clear, that the children are having a really good understanding of what they're doing. It's the chance to talk through. And now we're going to move on to the whole class feedback, which I'm going to read this and then I'm going to pass over to Ellie. Ellie has something prepared to talk about what she introduced a few weeks ago. So the whole class feedback, this is what is suggested. So we should read through the students' work. We should note their strengths. We should note the areas for improvement. We should give the feedback. And then we need to give the time, again, the improvement time. So if you think back to the Austin's butterfly, all the multiple drafting, if we don't schedule in enough time for the children to do it, it's not fair. They're not going to be able to do it correctly. So as part of a diet of feedback, this technique is an excellent way to give students timely, detailed, formative feedback while minimizing teacher workload. It replaces writing individual comments in books with feedback given to the class as a whole, which is perfect for us at the moment because we shouldn't really be touching children's books if we can help it. This allows the teacher to engage with the details of the work students produce rapidly to inform a short, effective feedback and improvement cycle. So, Ellie, I will put your slide on and over to you, Ellie.
Okay, so over last summer, I was really eager to explore how we could still give quality feedback, but still be in a safe manner, because obviously we've just come back from being on lockdown for so long. And then actually, whilst I was exploring it, it actually fitted really nicely with the whole class feedback within the walkthroughs. So I used that book to or that section, the section of the book, to really influence what I produced. So this is the comparative poems that I spoke about quite some time ago, actually, and I know it probably hasn't been used because obviously we haven't been in school for so long, and autumn term we were still getting to know our classes, etc. But I think moving forward, particularly looking at giving the whole class feedback, this could actually be a really useful tool to start embedding within our practice. And so what I do have is I do actually have a video which I originally made for governors, which actually models how I would use that. And it's 2 minutes and 45 seconds long, so it might actually be quicker than me trying to explain it. Should I go ahead and share that one, Eve?
Yeah. Yeah, that would be great.
It might actually be quicker than, and I actually say how I would use it as well. So this is my screen here. Can you see that, Eve?
Yes, I can.
Perfect. So it should just begin here. Comparative judgment marking sheet. This certainly does not replace verbal poems and enhancements within the classroom, but this reformer gives you an opportunity to make a comparative judgment of your class, but also reduces the amount of time you will need to touch your books after a session. So, after my session, I would lay all of my books out in front of me, which allows me to compare through the different outcomes. On my performer, I would write the area of the curriculum, area of learning, and the key skills that we have been looking at in that session. For example, the area of curriculum today would be English, the area of learning would be writing, and the key skill would be using a comma after a fronted adverbial. So I would have my outcomes out in front of me, allowing me to make a comparative judgment between all of my class. The very first column I would fill out would be this one here. So I would capture the children who are on track, just below, and below. And I would put their initials in here so I could see really clearly the categories of my class. I would then begin to look through the trending misconceptions within those categories. For example, for my children who are just below, their trending misconception is they were able to use a comma after a fronted adverbial if that was just one word, for example, slowly. However, if they were using a phrase, for example, yesterday morning, they were forgetting to use that comma. So that would be my trending misconception. Then in this column here, I would write down how I am going to respond to that misconception in my following session the next day. That may be space practice, that may be tweaking your input to further model that skill. And then after that session, you will come back and review, look at your books again, make that comparative judgment, and address whether that misconception has been responded to and that skill is now secured, or whether it needs to be responded to again in future planning. And that is our new performer that we are working on at the moment. I just close that and then come back to you. So I don't think it's up. I don't think it's up anymore. Sorry, Eve, because I took over sharing. So
that's okay. It's fine. It's fine.
The performer certainly kind of helps with the nature of giving our pupils time, because there's a real definite space in between when you would give your enhancement and then when you would review as well. And because we're going on, it's often the next session. I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be the next session, actually. You might do that really quickly after a session in the morning, and then put that in the afternoon. But I haven't quite mastered how I would do that quickly. But I suppose after practice, you could. But it definitely echoes that point of giving the children time to redraft and time to soak up your critique. So I haven't. I think I've used this once when I first started this year. I used it as as a pretend dummy run with my books from last year that you saw in the video. So it certainly is going to need some practice, and I'm pretty sure that this performer is definitely going to change once we've all started using it, and I'm really eager to tweak it even further and make it more suited to our needs. But that's what we've got so far. So I don't know if we've got time for questions, Eve,
yes.
Or if we've back to it in the summer, or
no, we've got time. If anybody wants to ask Ellie, now would be the right time to do it. So Ellie, should this be done every day, or?
When I made this, the things that I had read. So I read a lot. I read through the walkthrough, and then I read a lot from the comparative judgment. Daisy, I can't ever pronounce her last name.
Daisy Christodoulou.
And whenever I saw a model of how they were comparing, they were always comparing at more certain points within their writing sequence, and then within their planning they actually put down when this was going to happen. So it might be after your initial draft, after a second draft, and it was planned in when it was going to happen. And then I guess if we took that stance first of all, so we actually plan when this is going to happen, then we'd be able to get a lot quicker at it, and then we could actually end up doing it a lot more often. But I think I think after a first draft and then possibly after a second draft would be enough at the moment from a writing sense, because you're not going to need to do this all of the time, because lots of the times your misconceptions are addressed verbally at the time. It's more of a trending misconception. I just thought this would work really well for coming. Obviously, you've all been back. I haven't been back yet, but I know I'm going to definitely use this when I get back to really get to know my class again and to get to know those groups of children.
And it's the perfect way, because we can't really at the moment, we can't really go around writing in the books as much as what we used to do. So this is the perfect way at the moment for us to do as feedback and then send and then discuss it with the class as whole class feedback. It's a brilliant tool. Where would everybody find this, Ellie?
So when you go into planning 2021, it's in that file before you go into your own year group.
Right.
It's in that file. But I can send it out again. I can email everyone again.
Yeah, that would be really great. Thank you. Because we, if teams are meeting in the half an hour after school, this would be perhaps the perfect opportunity to do that during that time. I would think it'd be great. Thank you very much, Ellie.
That's okay.
So I was just going to say, we're moving forwards with our feedback now. Today was a little bit of a whistle-stop tour. We will be coming back to it in more detail in the summer term. I was just thinking a couple of questions. How are you going to ensure that feedback is effective, and which areas of giving pupil feedback could you enhance? So if we start with yellow block, please, what are you thinking? Anyone from yellow there, Carly-Ann?
Sorry, Eve, I was just trying to figure out how to...
You're muted. I can't see anyone's faces, so I don't know if you're there or not.
Yeah, hello. Can you just ask that question again? Sorry.
Yeah, so how are you going to ensure that feedback is effective, and basically which areas do you think you might need to enhance?
So obviously the area is a little bit different. So we use a lot of our feedback electronic and tapestry at the moment. So we'll capture something live with the children and then ask the parents to support with moving it forward. So if we've noticed, for example, this week in maths, we're looking at estimating, the children are finding that really tricky. We then might ask some of our families at home, say, you know, can you practice this at home? Or still finding this letter tricky, can you help us practice at home? And then the parents are then taking pictures at home and sharing that back with us. So that kind of links to the nice 5 AFL loop really quickly, which is good.
How do you do your whole class feedback? Because UIFS can be really good practice for people to get some.
We have a mixture. So obviously we use our misconception memo where we capture our misconceptions and address things as a whole class, but we break the rules, so we're still writing in book because our children need the model. So I can't expect them to form a letter correctly if I can't write it in yellow pen, for example. So we use our steps to success where we still green tick or dot it, and then they have an E linked to our learning steps.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you. What about red? What do you think? How are you going to ensure feedback's effective, and which areas do you need to enhance, do you think?
We were just saying that we're going to make sure that it's specific and appropriate for the children. Obviously, with the time off, we're going to make sure that those that need it slightly adapted and in small steps, the feedback. We're going to make sure it's appropriate for those children. But we obviously, like yellow, give a lot of oral feedback.
Mm-hmm.
And we are obviously still in ours because of year one, still giving lots of green letter formation and things like that. But we are using the stickers like what Ellie originally made with the letter formation as well. So we are still giving that written feedback as well in their books. But our main thing, I think, is just to make sure that it is specific and that the children can understand that feedback and respond to it. Areas that we want to enhance, Jess. What areas do we want to enhance in red block? I don't know if Ellie wants to jump in on that. Any areas we want to enhance on?
I'm always happy to jump in. So if I think all the way back to when we left, our main kind of feedback at that point was using the stickers, verbally giving feedback, children practicing on post-it notes or practicing and redrafting and showing that sequence in their books. But I'm not sure I necessarily captured my input, if that makes sense. You could see the progress in the books, but you didn't know what I'd been saying because I didn't write anything down. And then over remote learning, we really enjoyed kind of taking those snapshots of the children's work and then discussing really small sections. And I think that's what we need to start doing. So I would always look at a whole piece of work, whereas remote learning, I changed that because I felt that was overwhelming for a parent, and I only looked at small sections. And I think my practice was actually a lot better doing those really small sections of writing. And by the end, the writing that Jess and I got from the children at home was quite exceptional. It was a longer process, but that feedback really specifically in the small sections was better.
Yeah, I like that. I was just thinking, Ellie, as you were saying about taking the snapshots as well. I was just thought about it that literally, and I was thinking when we use our visualizers, what a great way, isn't it, to get immediate feedback with the children. You know, let's have a look at Caden's writing. It's amazing. Let's have a look. These are the P's, these are the E's. What do you think? What a great tool that we've got already set up waiting for us. So that would be one way that we do whole class feedback, like pretty quickly and effectively without impacting our workload too. That's
one particular part, so just looking at suffixes or just looking at everything.
Yeah, I really like that. I think that's great. Thank you, Red. Thank you, Ellie. What about anyone from Blue?
Hi Eve. So we said we want to improve our whole class feedback in marking outside of MAP, specifically looking at how we could use models and images and whether we would pre-prepare these or whether we would use live ones from the class. So similar to what Ellie said there.
Yeah, perfect. I think you're right. I totally agree. I think it's all about models and images as well. I remember a while back we were talking about how Catherine was doing it, wasn't she? We were collating images of beautiful pieces of work that the children could look at and really inspire to. And also like professional models and images. If we're doing art, you know, why not? Let's show them what the artists are producing. Let's show them some really high quality pieces of work. And I think that always works, doesn't it? That is, and if you're aspiring to something, if something stimulates you and you're aspired to do it, you'll do well. And then when we combine that with our feedback, what amazing outcomes we'll get. It's really good. Thank you, Lorna. I totally agree. Anyone from Green?
So we just said that we could probably look at doing some more kind of whole class intervention once we've given the feedback, if there's a general theme. So I think just to kind of cut down on workload, and because some of our feedback quite often needs to be quite complex, it's quite hard to do it to lots of different children and find the time to do that. And there are quite often reoccurring themes. So just looking at maybe a bit more at planning in, even if it's not a whole session, just making sure we're planning in, even if it's kind of 10, 15 minutes at the beginning, some whole class feedback. And actually, they're really good at responding in that way. And you can get quite a lot from that, because then going back to our previous CPD sessions, you can kind of go a bit more in depth with the questioning about the why and the how, and what would you build on from that? How could we extend this even further? And then even for those children that have maybe done it fairly well in their writing, it then might extend them as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you as well, Sarah. And I think having that board where it's got the 6 strategies on, the 6 effective strategies, I do feel that makes a difference, because it's always in your mind, it's there, you can see it. If nobody knows what I'm talking about, you're welcome to come over and have a look in my classroom and look at the board, because it can easily be replicated onto the folded learning walls behind me, because that's really good, and it makes you think. When I collate my misconceptions, it always makes me think about which children, do they need the retrieval, do they need the space practice, and then I can group them, and then, as Sarah's just said, then you can do your interventions and you can flash it up in the morning and do your whole class recap. So yeah, I think it's really good. It makes a very big difference, and I think it's a good way to move forwards with feedback. So thank you.
I was just going to say as well, I think those boards are really useful, because I remember from when we first had them put up, I was in Blue Block, and it just, even if you've then just got 5 minutes, it's really clear for your TA to then think. So for times tables, for example, we'd put up space practice or whatever for a times table, and the TAs knew just to look at that board, or a spelling that we knew that a certain group of children didn't have. It's really obvious then, I've got 5 minutes, let me just take these 3 children and do this.
Yeah.
Or, you know, whatever it might be.
I think it's one of the best tools that we've got, actually, that board. I use it with Mandy quite often. I do exactly what you've said. I just quickly scribble initials up there and like put a circle around it and say 5 minutes, and she pulls them out when she can, and it's really good. It's effective. Yeah, I agree, Sarah. Thank you. So we've got a little gap task to do. So over the next few weeks, I really want you to take some video footage of feedback in different situations. So writing obviously is the obvious one, but if we could have a variety of subjects that we're doing, it'd be really good. If we're going in to do some retrieval, some space practice, if your TA is grabbing them for 5 or 6 minutes just to do something, just quickly video it. It doesn't need to be perfect, not looking for like professional video quality. I just want videos to capture what we do at Mayflower. And then remember last week I shared with you that video library that I've made. Then we can create our own video library about, yeah, we've learned about feedback and now this is what we do at Mayflower. But I really want a selection of videos across the whole academy, so it's not just me with Year 4. We've got a whole selection. That would be.
I would love to see some PE ones for that as well, please.
Do you know what?
Gymnastics.
Brilliant, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
It would be really good. Wouldn't it be great if we could get it across the subjects? So it's not just your standard MEP, your standard writing. We've really thought about how we use our feedback. PE would be a great one to do, actually. You're right. And then if we could continue to add questioning evidence to the portfolios that we created last time, please. Again, including any video footage that you're doing. So don't worry about your videos being perfect. That's not what we're looking for at all. It's real life, isn't it? So that's what we're looking for. Next week is the LAT CPD. And then the week after is our planning CPD ready for summer term, which would be great. So have we got any questions before we finish? We're a little early, which is always nice. So any questions? I can't see faces, so you'll have to just shout at me if you want to say something. No, if not, feel free to email me or pop in, because I do realise it was a whistle-stop tour today and we've had lots of information. And like I said, we will pick it up in the summer again when we've got the time. So thank you, everybody, and enjoy your evenings. See you later. Bye.
Thank you, Eve. Bye.
Bye.